If you would, please join me at John chapter 13. John chapter 13. We're going to read verse 35. John chapter 13, verse 35. Jesus says, "By this all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." It's very often in this world that people would seek a sign. They'd want to see something. And here, in this case, Jesus gives a very definitive and a tangible sign for all. If they see love in his disciples, it will be a sign that we are his. Even though it's an easy to understand concept, it's a difficult thing for us to follow through with. And why? Why is it so hard for us to do? Well, it's because it's about sacrifice. And that's the type of love that Jesus is talking about here, the type of love that is willing to give of self for something or somebody else. It's uncommon in this world. It's not something that we see every day. It's against our nature and our senses because we're often thinking of ourselves, of course. We have senses that tell us what's going on with us, what's going on around us as an individual. But being willing to consider others is more difficult. Now, if we read verse 34, we'll get a little bit more clarity on this sign. Verse 34 reads, "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, as I have loved you, that you also love one another." So there is our target. We are to be a sign, and we are to love as Jesus loved. Great. Easy, right? No, because once again, we understand what he did was completely sacrifice. Not only his life into death, but as he lived, he gave of himself in love. He did this in many different ways. And of course, we know the reason he could do it is because he was God. He was of God. He has God's Spirit. We also have God's Spirit. Those of us that have been baptized have God's Holy Spirit, his power within us. And maybe those that aren't baptized yet have it working with us. With that power, Jesus loved his disciples in many different categories. These are the categories that I selected. You may have some different, but I'm just going to read through quickly. In a broad sense, Jesus taught his disciples. He corrected them. He tested them. He fed them both physically and spiritually. He led them. He forgave them. Jesus empowered them. He encouraged the disciples. He assigned them roles to serve in. He sacrificed for them. He gave them a perfect example. He cared for them and their families. He was honest with them. He rescued them, and he warned them. Many different things that Jesus did for them. So Jesus is our standard. He's the one that gave us the words, "Love as he did." And that might be a little strange for us, the idea that, well, he was the master. He was the teacher. That was his mission. And will never be the master. He's the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. But we are to be his children. And he gave us this task. So we want to keep that in mind. Jesus assigned us to do that. He wouldn't assign something for us to do that was too hard. He gave us the capability through his Spirit, his power, if we submit to him. So let's use his own example that we have recorded in Scripture. We have a lot of information of things he did, and we will review how we are to love one another. And if we fulfill this new command from Jesus, we will be a sign to all. So let's start with the category of Jesus fed his disciples. If you turn with me to John chapter 21, we'll see Jesus fed his disciples. And of course, if we thought of it spiritually, we'd say, of course, he fed them all the time. All the examples would fit that category. But in this case, it's a physical feeding. Let's go to John 21, verse 4. This is, of course, after Jesus Christ had been abandoned by the disciples and he was crucified, and the disciples knew of this event. His tomb was empty. He appeared to them at various times, and at some point Peter said, I'm going fishing. So we pick up the story here, chapter 21, verse 4. But when morning had now come, Jesus stood on the shore, yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Then Jesus said to them, Children, have you any food? They answered him, No. And he said to them, Cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some. So they cast, and now they were not able to draw it in because of the multitude of fish. Therefore that disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, It is the Lord. Now when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his outer garment, for he had removed it, and he plunged into the sea. But the other disciples came in the little boat. Verse 9, Then as soon as they had come to land, they saw a fire of coals there, and fish laid on it, and bread. You see the tremendous love that Peter has. Can't wait to see Jesus again. Jumps off the boat. Let's skip ahead to verse 12 here to continue the thought on the food. Jesus said to them, Come and eat breakfast. Yet none of the disciples dared ask him, Who are you? Knowing that it was the Lord. Verse 13, Jesus then came, took the bread, and gave it to them, and likewise the fish. So this is just a physical example of Jesus Christ, God in the flesh. He came and he gave his disciples a physical meal, something that we all appreciate, we all need. Physical nourishment on a regular basis has to happen, else we will not continue to live. We got to eat. But we like eating food. We have this as a church tradition that we're constantly sharing food. Ever since I was young, it was a church tradition. I remember many potlucks in Worldwide, and I'd always have to ask Mom where your stuff is. Because, of course, you only like your mom's stuff when you're little. But it was 4 tables long, hundreds of people. We keep that tradition now. We like to eat together. We enjoy it. And God knows we enjoy it. He didn't make it only for our physical sustenance, which we need, but he knows we enjoy it. And here Jesus provides a meal for his disciples. And you know this that he did? It is something that he looks favorably on. It's not just a little thing. I mean, we might think of it as a small thing, but let's turn to Matthew chapter 25 and just be reminded. When Jesus gives one of many little pictures of the kingdom here in Matthew chapter 25. This is the one where the goat are separated from the sheep, the right hand and the left hand. Matthew 25, verse 34 reads, Assuredly I say to you, this Oops, that's 24. Sorry. If I didn't say it right, 25, verse 34. Then the king will say to those on his right hand, Come, you blessed of my Father. Inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. And of course, as we know, further down, they say, Well, when do we do these things for you? And he said, When you did it for one of mine, you did it for me. Something as small as bringing something to eat or something to drink, God looks favorably upon. He does it for us. He wants us to consider one another and do it for each other. It's a type of love that reflects God's own love. Because as we know, and we've heard recently, God is a sustainer, not just of us as people either, the whole earth. He takes care of all things. All the birds get to eat. God makes sure of it. All of nature is provided for and taken care of. And cynically, somebody might bring up, well, there's exceptions because there's somebody starving over here. But we understand that there are multiple reasons for things like that could happen. Time and chance happens to all men. We also understand that mankind causes so many problems for ourselves. That's not uncommon for us to cause the problem. And ultimately, the Bible does describe, yes, hunger can be a punishment too. So there's multiple reasons. God is not negligent or incapable of providing. He does it for the whole earth, and he has for thousands of years. And like Jesus, we can feed one another in love, taking that example from him that we see, being his disciples and being a clear sign to all that we are his disciples. So that's one thing Jesus did. Jesus fed his disciples. Another thing was Jesus was honest with his disciples. Jesus was honest with his disciples. And of course, we know God doesn't lie, so this could be every single word that he ever said. But let's look at some of those moments that perhaps were maybe a little bit more difficult things to hear. Let's turn to Luke chapter 9. Luke chapter 9. There's some individuals that are talking to Jesus about coming with him. Luke chapter 9, verse 57. Now it happened as they journeyed on the road that someone said to him, Lord, I will follow you wherever you go. And Jesus said to him, Foxes have holes, and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. This is not selling the role. This is being upfront and honest. If you're trying to sell something, you usually tell people the benefits, and you don't bring up those things, at least not immediately. Jesus is not sugarcoating this. He lets this individual know right away, as long as you're okay with not having a place to call your own. This is what part of the calling is. Jesus was very honest about discipleship. In verse 59, he says to another, Follow me. But the other said, Lord, let me first go and bury my father. Now, this is something taught that a Jewish idiom includes this thought where when they're talking about burying, that doesn't mean the person is dead already. It's the idea of caring for an elderly parent that is, very old. So this wasn't necessarily that the person had right there at the moment to go and literally bury a parent. But Jesus says to them, verse 60, Let the dead bury their own dead, but you go and preach the kingdom of God. And that hits kind of as a difficult thing for us to take in. But the reality is, when Jesus Christ is preaching, he is constantly pointing people to the spiritual. We're so caught up in the physical all the time, and in almost everything he says, there is this push towards the spiritual. We need to take off these physical blinders, and we need to consider the spiritual. And in this case, he's telling this individual, you need to have a focus that is more on me and less on your physical. This is what's most important. Those that are living a life for the physical and not considering their spiritual, he talks about that in another time. Those who seek to save their life will lose it. Those who lose their lives for my sake will find it. Are we willing to give up for him? The spiritual is what's most important. And sometimes that's a hard thing to hear, and he tells this person honestly this hard thing. Verse 61, another also said, Lord, I will follow you, but let me first go and bid them farewell who are at my house. Once again, if you go back to the culture, some of the history will talk about how these farewells ended up being very large and time-consuming processes. They might say, well, stay one more day. Okay, you can leave tomorrow, but stay one more day. And it would last on and on. It wasn't just hey, bye, Mom and Dad. And so in this case, Jesus says, If you're looking back, if you're thinking of the physical, let me just read it here, verse 62. No one, having put his hand to the plow and looking back, is fit for the kingdom of God. He's very honest. You have to be committed. You have to be willing to put the spiritual first. You need to put God first. You need to let that go. So he was very honest about the cost of discipleship. He was not selling it. That idea of sacrifice, of self, or giving up that personal choice is very difficult, even for us to just reading these. I kind of read it and cringe a little bit about what that would have felt like to hear that from Jesus. But he's very serious and honest about our calling and how important it is and where we need to place our value in this life. Let's look at another example in Matthew chapter 15. Matthew chapter 15. And we're going to read verses 12 to 14. Matthew 15, verse 12. This is right after the Pharisees were trying to cause trouble. The disciples of Jesus weren't following the traditions, and so they're trying to call them out, and Jesus refutes them. Verse 12 of chapter 15 in Matthew, his disciples came and said to him, "Do you know that the Pharisees were offended when they heard this saying?" And the tone that we can read here, probably a couple different ways. I doubt that it was amused, that they thought, oh, they're really offended. It's probably more fear. These are the powerful people. You offended them. And who are we? We don't have an army or anything like that. It was probably more fear. And we'll get that from the next place we go to as well, that there's a little bit of timidity with these individuals. Well, let's keep reading here, verse 13. He answered, Jesus said, "Every plant which my heavenly Father has not planted will be uprooted. Let them alone. They are blind leaders of the blind, and if the blind leads the blind, both will fall into the ditch." Jesus gives permission here. It's okay not to be tied up with belligerent people that are going to just want to fight or argue or prove that they're right. They don't have to worry about them. They don't have to give them all their time. They don't have to fear these people. Jesus makes it very plain and very, very bluntly. He's honest with them. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. You've got other things to concern you. Their end already is known. All right, let's turn to John chapter 11. John chapter 11, for one. Again, this truth, this honesty that Jesus gives to his disciples. In some cases, I think we sometimes feel like, well, we should probably give this with a grain of salt, we say, or maybe not tell the whole truth and just give part, but listen to what Jesus says in this next one. This is the example of Lazarus here. Lazarus is, I'm in Luke. I got to get with it here. John chapter 11. Lazarus is very sick. Chapter 11, verse 1. A certain man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. It was that Mary who had anointed the Lord with fragrant oil, wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. Therefore the sisters sent to him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom you love is sick. And when Jesus heard that, he said, well, let's go there immediately. Actually, it's not what he said. He said that sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. He did love them. So when he heard that he was sick, he stayed 2 more days in the place where he was. It does seem a little odd that he would stay 2 days there, if perhaps he knew his friend who he loved was that sick. Usually that's not the reaction you'd expect, but maybe he was very busy, or maybe there's another reason for it. Let's just keep reading. Then after this, he said to the disciples, let us go to Judea again. The disciples said to him, Rabbi, lately the Jews sought to stone you, And are you going there again? And we have another instance here where there was a timidity about approaching these. They don't like you very much. And they probably were thinking about themselves too, but they used Jesus as, hey, for your own good. Maybe you don't want to go there right now. Verse 9, Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble because he sees the light of this world. But if one walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him. These things he said, and afterward he said, our friend Lazarus sleeps, but I go that I may wake him up. Then his disciples said, Lord, if he sleeps, he will get well. This is an answer to our prayers. We don't have to go by these people that want to stone you. However, Jesus spoke of his death, but they thought he was speaking about taking rest in sleep. Then Jesus said to them plainly, Lazarus is dead, and I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, that you may believe. Nevertheless, let us go to him. Here, the disciples, they are concerned about what the Jews may do. And Jesus says, look, if you're on team light, you're going to be okay. You're on my team. We can go forward. We don't have to be afraid. If you're on the other team, then you need to be afraid. But it's okay. We're going to go there. And I'm glad he's dead. It seems like a strange thing to say. He's glad Lazarus died for their sakes, he says. For their sake, for the sake of the disciples, for their faith. Because in this, God would be glorified, and they would have their faith grown. That's pretty honest. And yet we know Jesus loved them. And a little bit later it says Jesus wept. He did care. He wasn't callous. But if he's being honest, he was happy that it happened this way for the sake of his disciples. He didn't have to tell them that part, but he did, because Jesus was honest. It was good for them. Let's look at one more example of his honesty in Mark chapter 8. Mark chapter 8. This is a warning that is mentioned several times by Jesus in a little bit different ways, a couple different places. Mark chapter 8, verse 31. And he, Jesus, began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He spoke the word openly, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. What would you do if your friend said, oh, this awful thing's coming and there's no way out of it? And probably Jesus didn't say it quite like that. But it wouldn't be uncommon for you to take your friend and say, hey, this is going to be okay. These things aren't going to happen to you. Don't be talking like that. But in verse 33, when he, that's Jesus, had turned around and looked at his disciples, he rebuked Peter, saying, get behind me, Satan, for you are not mindful of the things of God, but of the things of men. I'm sure that was probably pretty hard to hear. I've not been called Satan very many times, but it's offensive to hear that. I don't know how you would react. But he made sure that all the disciples were paying attention. He told them the good, the bad, and the ugly of all things that were going to happen. And when somebody's trying to comfort him, he made sure they were paying attention, and he rebukes Peter. He once again lets them know, look, you are thinking of the physical. And what does our adversary do? What is one of his traps that he does? Is he wants us to get thinking of the physical and our mind off of the spiritual. Jesus had a mission to go accomplish. Part of that mission, he explained to his disciples. Part of his mission was teaching the disciples. And here he is very honest with them, letting them know where this influence comes from and what their focus needs to be. That is honesty. A little blunt sometimes, but the rebuke was not cruel. It was intended out of love. Now, we also, like Jesus, we are honest with one another, and we should be. We should be honest and open with one another as brethren. And that culture that we have of honesty is largely unique in our society that we are in right now. Because today's culture is very much about, we can say it a couple different ways, live and let live. Just be you. It's okay how you are. That's wonderful. Be you. And that is not loving. It is not loving to wipe away or to hide the sins of another person, something that is leading them towards destruction. Love would be helping them. Love would be wanting them to not go through the horrible, consequence of the decisions that you're going to make. So we can unlovingly deceive and encourage deviance from God's way, or we can love and we can have those sometimes tough conversations, tough suggestions, but we can do it in a peaceful and loving way, honestly. Jesus was honest. And so we together, we honestly discuss godly standards together in conversation. And sometimes that might be about a current event, something that happened in our lives, something we witnessed, or perhaps somebody's expressing something and they're not sure how to look at this situation or this decision. And we honestly tell them in love, what does the Bible say? What's God's perspective on that? What is the spiritual thought that we need to think about when we're considering these things? We're honest. We also encourage each other honestly to stay focused on that spiritual mission. That has to be the priority. God has to be our priority. Also, we that are older or that are in roles of servant leadership here at church services, we are honest about our discussions and our hope for growth within the body. As we understand, and we'll talk about momentarily, we are one body and we are to grow and we're to help one another. And so we are honest about our hopes and our plan to move forward together as that body. Honest, open communication is necessary, even though sometimes it is a little bit more difficult. But God teaches honesty in our approach with one another. We can turn to an example in Matthew chapter 18. It's a fairly familiar set of scriptures. It's one that is certainly easy to read and hard to apply because we don't always like the idea of having that difficult, honest conversation with one another. But in Matthew chapter 18 and verse 15, this is Jesus talking. This is not a disciple. This is not somebody making up their own opinion. This is God in the flesh telling us that this is how to do this. Verse 15. Moreover, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he hears you, you have gained your brother. But if he will not hear you, take with you one or two more, that by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses every word may be established. And if he refuses to hear them, tell it to the church. But if he refuses even to hear the church, let him be to you like a heathen and a tax collector. God does not tell us to hold these things in. He doesn't tell us to just sweep it under the rug. Now, yes, we need to be forgiving and we need to be loving, but we need to be honest and we need to be willing to go and have those in a loving way, in a private way, to have that conversation with another person. It's important. Paul speaks about the importance of truth and honesty in Ephesians quite a bit, and in a lot of his writing. But let's turn to Ephesians and just review some of these examples that we know well. Ephesians chapter 4. Ephesians chapter 4, we were just talking about functioning together. Let's read verses 15 and 16. Ephesians 4, verse 15. But speaking the truth in love may grow up in all things into him who is the head, Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and knit together by what every joint supplies, according to the effective working by which every part does its share, causes growth of the body and the edifying of itself in love. We're intended to work together. We're intended to communicate, and we have to do that honestly if we expect production, good, godly fruit. And in verse 15, he says, speaking the truth in love. That is how we go about communicating with one another, with truth, with honesty. As many of you know, that speaking is not actually there in the Greek. The Greek word is truth as a verb. So some people will say truthing in love, as if that's the complete basis of the communication. It's all truth. It's all honesty. Don't have to be rude to be honest, but we do have to have open, honest communication if we want to hit the goal that is listed here, that we work together. A little further down, as Paul's talking about putting off the bad things, putting on good, verse 25, he will highlight, he says, therefore, putting away lying, each one speak truth with his neighbor, for we are members with one another. That's something that we're taught from a very young age. Tell the truth. Tell the truth with one another. It's one of the 10 Commandments. But right here, actually, Paul is quoting from Zechariah. It's an Old Testament passage in chapter 8 where it refers to what will be. It's a future prophecy. In the future, God will take care of people, and this is the standard. It hasn't changed. It was since the beginning. It will be in the future. We will teach this honest, open communication as we're supposed to be practicing now. And when we do, we are that sign that we are of Christ. That's how we operate. We shine now. We'll teach it later. Later on in Ephesians, Paul talks about being belted with truth. It's completely surround you. You're enveloped by truth. And as we know, Jesus was always honest with his disciples. He was honest in every word. He can't lie. And just like Paul preaches for us to be honest and open, Jesus was with his disciples. So we want to be honest, just like Jesus was. Jesus also cared for his disciples. That's our next category we're going to look at. Jesus cared for his disciples and for their families. And we see this in many places. We already talked about Lazarus. He did care. He loved Lazarus. He went there. He resurrected him. We also know the stories where he healed and fed many, thousands. And among those were his disciples. He made sure that they also were fed too. He healed many out of his love and compassion. We have the example of him healing Peter's mother-in-law because she was sick. He cared for his disciples. And let's go to an example in Mark chapter 6 now. This is one I feel like we reviewed it recently. I don't know for sure. But Jesus sent out his disciples from time to time. He sent out the apostles, and he had the mission for them. And he gave them great detail of how they were to go about it. We're going to jump in at verse 30. They were excited when they got back. They're telling them all about it. They're telling them how busy they were. And let's notice how Jesus reacts for them. Mark chapter 6, verse 30. Then the apostles gathered to Jesus and told him all things, both what they had done and what they had taught. And he said to them, come aside by yourselves to a deserted place and rest a while. For there were many coming and going, and they did not even have time to eat. So they departed to a deserted place in the boat by themselves. This is somebody that cares for another. He noticed that they were so busy, hearing from them, maybe judging by the way they look. Of course, he's God, so he knew how they were exhausted or whatever. They hadn't even to eat. They were so excited. They're telling him about, we didn't have time to eat. We're doing all these great things. And what does he do but designates a break for them? That's love. That is caring for somebody else when you say, okay, come take a little break. You need it. It's okay. Take a break. Have a sit. Have you ever had a period of time in your life where that day, or maybe it was a week or a month, where you're saying, wow, this has just been really peaceful. And I just really needed that, to be able to have that time. Who do you think gave you that time? The Father watches out for all of us. And yes, we're going to have the time with the choppy waves where we need God to come and save us, but He's also going to bless us with those times where we have peace, because He knows what we need. He knows that we're physical. He knows what we can handle, and He loves us. We're His kids. And so God the Father takes care of His children, and Jesus Christ cared for His disciples. And when we care for one another, it shows. People can see it. They are loving people because we consider one another and take care of one another. The body, as an example, as an analogy, works great. And Paul uses this. We'll turn to 1 Corinthians 12. A very often used example because it's such a good one. But we know, having a body, the body responds when something happens. So let's say we stub our toe. We might bend down. Oh, my whole body reacted to me stubbing my toe. And sometimes our mouth, which is the part that's not so good. But we have these reactions not just localized to that one spot. We feel it. And then, of course, you have the good things like being full. Oh, your whole body enjoys it, laying out on the couch or whatever. You're full, you're satisfied. Your whole body is content because your stomach is full. It's a wonderful thing. That is how a body acts, together as one. And that is our goal as a body, as family. 1 Corinthians chapter 12, we'll jump in at verse 18. But now God has set the members, each one of them, in the body, just as He pleased. And if they were all one member, where would the body be? But now indeed there are many members, yet one body. So here we are. We're all different portions of the body. Let's jump down to second half of verse 24. But God composed the body, having given greater honor to that part that lacks it, that there should be no schism or no division in the body, but that the members should have the same care for one another. And if one member suffers, all the members suffer with it. Or if one member is honored, all the members all the members rejoice with it. This is how a body operates, and we recognize that within our own body, and that is how we act as congregations of God, children of God. When we have a prayer request that goes out, especially that of an urgent nature, we approach God collectively. We go on our knees with love for that person and their families, and we appeal to God because we are that family. And then when things are good, we are so happy to see it. And we praise God, and we are grateful that He did that for that person, because that's how a body acts. When we are truly part of this body and this congregation, and this is a very loving congregation that we are very blessed to be part of, that is something people witness. That is something people see from the outside, and they know when they visit, boy, that is a loving group. And that requires that communication that we've talked about. You have to have communication because we are not literally attached like a body is. And that communication works both ways. That's something we have to remember. That means when we haven't seen somebody, reach out. It may be good for that person to know, hey, you're attached to us. I love you and I want to know how you're doing. But again, that's two ways, meaning if you're not able to be here, or if something happened and you're frustrated, call, reach out. Because if you're not attached, you have a responsibility to be part of that communication as well. My mom constantly would say growing up, and still does to our grandkids. If you want to have friends, you need to show yourself friendly. It's the same principle. You have to have that communication. You have to be willing to make the communication, to be a part, to be connected. And then, of course, the other side needs to reciprocate. So when it comes to loving together as a body, we communicate. We do check up. We do have that love for one another. Paul noticed it within the congregations he served too. And he says so in 1 Thessalonians 5:11. He says, "Therefore comfort each other and edify one another, just as you also are doing." Just as you're doing. He saw it in the congregation. And I would imagine that most all of you would say the same thing about the congregation that you are a part of. That is shining a light. Jesus cared for his disciples and all. Truly, he cared for all, and so should we. And when we do, we are a sign to others that we are of him. This idea of Jesus caring for his disciples leads into this next point that we'll cover, and that is that Jesus sacrificed for his disciples. Jesus sacrificed for his disciples. Now, we know, of course, that only Jesus, the perfect one, could be a sacrifice for all mankind, that his blood could be accepted and we could be forgiven. None of us fits that standard. By the time we learn right and wrong, we've already blew it. We already made the mistakes and we've sinned. So we understand that. Jesus Christ came and did what none of us could do. And he did it willingly, and he did it proactively. Let's see in John chapter 18. This was not a calling he shied away from. As we know, it was preordained before the foundations of the earth that this would happen, this would need to happen. And in the event, although we can read about how in the garden he was praying for another way, and who can blame him, he said, "Not my will, but yours be done." He didn't just hide there and wait. In John chapter 18, we can pick it up in verse 2. Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place, for Jesus often met there with his disciples. Then Judas, having received a detachment of troops and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees, came there with lanterns, torches, and weapons. Jesus, therefore, knowing all things that would come upon him, went forward. He went forward. That's how Jesus was a sacrifice. It was unparalleled what he did for mankind, his death, walking into it, knowing. And that was one. That was one of the sacrifices that he made for us. Another sacrifice that he made is he was God. Co-eternal, co-existent, almighty. He created the earth, the known universe. Who knows what else is out there? Some people call the universe a curtain in their flowery language. And if it's literal, what's behind the curtain? You know, God has done everything. And then he came into a body. You know, physical. Can you imagine the restriction that must have felt like? To come here and be so limited? To not be able to do whatever you wanted to do? I mean, he could still have some perception. He could read people's hearts, and that's amazing, but he was limited. He did that for us. That seems like a very difficult choice to come down and make. That's very humble that he would come down into this form. Paul describes it in Philippians as emptying himself fully of being God, still God in the flesh. But that is the sacrifice he did. And then when he was here in the flesh, he didn't say, well, I got a bucket list and I want to go see this and I want to go talk to this person, hear this concert. And he wasn't concerned about himself. Another sacrifice he did is that he lived his life from the beginning of it as service for mankind, service for his Father. He fulfilled the will of God. Even when he was 12, he went into the... Did you want to go to church when you were 12? I didn't. That was a boring day. But he was on a mission from his Father. And he lived that life. Let's turn to Luke chapter 22. Luke chapter 22. After Jesus observes the New Testament Passover with his brethren, with his disciples, let's jump in at verse 24. But there was also rivalry among them as to which of them should be considered the greatest. And he said to them, the kings of the Gentiles exercise lordship over them, and those who exercise authority over them are called benefactors, or they call themselves benefactors. But not so among you. On the contrary, he who is greatest among you, let him be as the younger, and he who governs as he who serves. For who is greater, he who sits at the table or he who serves? Is it not he who sits at the table, yet I am among you as the one who serves? This is something that I believe we all heard a message recently, but Jesus gives us the perspective who we are supposed to be. We're supposed to be the servant. We're supposed to be the one willing to give up for one another. It's not about seeking out attention or pride. It's about being willing to serve and give up. And Jesus' life, not just his death, but his life was lived as a sacrifice for his Father, for others. That's what Jesus did. And that's the example that we're all told to follow. In fact, Paul calls it our reasonable service, Romans 12:1. We are to be that living sacrifice. That's reasonable for what God has done for us. He came down as God. We are just born here. And he's given us this opportunity to become him. It's reasonable for us to live as he lived. Jesus was a true sacrifice. But yet, this is still the standard that we're given. If we turn to 1 John chapter 3, John writes this epistle about a generation after he had witnessed Jesus, spent time with him, been taught by him. The other disciples are gone, and he's trying to encourage and keep things going. Confidently, he says this, 1 John chapter 3, verse 16, by this we know love, because he laid down his life for us, and we also ought to lay down our lives for the brethren. God gave all of us time. He gave us this life as a gift, and we get to choose. How are we going to spend it? What are we going to do with our life? It's not wrong to enjoy life, but choosing one another in service is an expectation that God gave us. This is something we need to be doing. And choosing one another over ourselves is a love that reflects Jesus' love and God the Father's love. And that's what he told us to do. John 13:34 reads, verse 35, by this all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. Brethren, we can be a sign. We are a sign. And so as we consider how Jesus Christ loved himself, we can take that on as our goal, become like him, and shine in this world so that he would be pleased. So that they would know, that people would look at us as, no, there's something different about them. They are Christ's disciples.